this week is finishing the Living and Learning series, which is about my Annus Horribilis and the year after, and what I learnt from those. And the way I've done it is, as we've passed important events, I've used the blogs on those weeks to talk about things. Now, I broke my ankle in the summer when a lot of the stuff in the year after my Annus Horribilis kicked off, and I wasn't able to speak about what I wanted to at the time. So I'm going to do so now. I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible because A, it's a long story, B, it doesn't do much good to rehash it constantly. I need to be a bit careful what I say, because I suppose there are still people that are involved which, you know, could be monitoring things like this. So I want to say that, you know, this is my version of events, and I'm sure if you talked to some other people they may have slightly different versions of events. But there we are. This is the truth as I see it. And I have here all the bump that goes with that war particularly. It was the biggest war that I've ever fought. What happened was that, I'll just recap roughly on where we're up to. So I spoke about my Annus Horribilis and the start of some of the symptoms of my anxiety disorder. At the time of my anxiety disorder, about how it flared up at the end of my university, about how it disappeared over the summer and then reappeared once I had started at St Paul's Cathedral, and how I had started medication for the depression that came as a result of those symptoms, and how after the new year in 2004 those symptoms disappeared. But I was referred to a neurologist just for safety's sake anyway. Now, in the June, I was due to have an MRI which would answer for all time whether there was something wrong with me biologically, or whether, as the doctor suspected, it was an anxiety disorder and reactive depression because of that. And I sent out a prayer request email that ended up in the wrong hands. Do you know, when you're speaking about past events, you can often use hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, but you don't have hindsight at the time. And I had put something like, you know, my mystery illness began in April 2003, which of course was before I had applied to St Paul's Cathedral, you know, and got the job and whatever. And my line manager and the person who was the priest in charge of the community at that time, senior member of clergy, banded together to try and say, hang on, he's lied about the state of his health at interview, because I replied to the question, you know, should there be any medical conditions that, you know, may affect your application? And I replied, none that I'm aware of. And I did that because the symptoms that I had been suffering before had gone, and that I had been told that it had just, you know, I'd been told by the medical profession that there was nothing wrong with me, so why would I say anything else? I also made quite clear that as soon as the anxiety returned in October, the first thing I did was to inform the cathedral. So they'd known about that for months and months and months before they decided to launch this case against me. Civil cases, civil disciplinaries, are run by institutions, although in my case I was prosecuted by a former Major General, which was a barrel of laughs, I can assure you. They are brought against individuals and they work under civil law, which means basically you are not taken to court, so to speak. You're not prosecuted by them unless it's felt that they already have a working hypothesis that makes you guilty, because it's not based on evidence. All they need for a conviction is a working hypothesis, which of course is, if they didn't have one of those to begin with, they wouldn't be, saying that you had done something wrong. The judge and the jury are also the prosecution, so you have to convince somebody who has already brought you into the room because they think you have done something wrong that you actually haven't, and proof doesn't count. So it's an absolutely mad situation. The only way you can really get out of it is by pointing out any errors they might have made in terms of protocol, like, for example, bringing you into a room before all this blows up in your face and saying, you can resign now or we will ensure that you are fired. That would be a breach of protocol, and if you were to bring that up, then you would undermine the legitimacy of the proceedings, and they would still be in their rightful mind to find you guilty, but they would probably not be able to pronounce sentence in terms of expulsion, because lying at the stage of interview or whatever is gross misconduct, which is punishable basically by being sacked. The Citizens Advice Bureau said to me that they thought it was a case of attempted constructive dismissal, because as soon as that was over, my line manager continued to launch yet another, disciplinary proceeding, and it was, am I fit for work for my role, blah, 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 and, I had to go and see a medical practitioner of their choice to make sure that I was absolutely, perfectly suitable for the job, blah, blah, blah. This continued until September, and the importance of that is that it marked my first year of employment there, and once you pass your first year of employment, particularly if you're part-time, you gain the right of unfair and constructive dismissal. And what would you know, September the 1st came round and the whole thing blew over. It was as if everybody had no problem with me and we had rewound the clock 3 months. It was so strange, so strange. Now, that in a nutshell is what happened. A lot of the people that supported me were fighting for themselves in a political manner. A lot of people later said to me that they didn't even believe that I was innocent at all. But for political reasons, they felt the need to basically support me. And that might have had something to do with the fact that, my line manager was basically said to have been Grand Master of a Freemasons Lodge or whatever, and being that they didn't like that, any excuse to rally against him. I think from the priestly perspective, the community had already been having hard times. Somebody had legitimately had to be removed from the community several months before, and maybe this was a ill-guided attempt to stop that happening again, nip it in the bud. But whatever their reasoning, it boiled down to the fact they basically didn't like me and wanted to get rid of me. And there wasn't just the employment aspect of that. I guess from that, what I really learnt is the world works by workplace politics. It does. Wherever you are, however nice the people are, everybody has their own set agenda, and that's just the way things go. I try not to get into positions of authority unless I'm specifically invited to, for that reason. I try to be as politically abstentional as possible, but I do my best also to be political when it's needed, to ensure that I don't end up in that sort of situation again. So I do dot my I's and cross my T's and make sure that I know what my rights are, etc., etc. And I feel that's a life skill that I learnt from that. The spiritual ramifications were, I'm afraid, a lot longer, basically. I'd always been a Christian. I remained a Christian throughout. But my disillusionment with what the church could do, what somebody who said they were called to be a priest, and called specifically to look after people, young people, and provide a protective environment for them, that was blown out of the window with cynicism and also a case of feeling like I'd been betrayed. I told sensitive information to this individual, and although I kept working there for a year, I worked out my tenure after that. For lots of reasons, I basically gave up on the church as an institution. It's hard for somebody who isn't a Christian, either you're agnostic or you're an atheist, to understand the difference between the religion, as in an established church, and Christianity itself. Let me tell you that 90% of what you understand and what you think of as religion is nothing spiritual at all. It's man-made. It's completely man-made. It's dogma, it's litany, it's thoughts of other men on religion, and it's the sayings of a power-hungry institution that is as political as any other institution in the world, more so perhaps. It's not to be confused with the actual spirituality, which is basically to do with a relationship with the divine, following the scriptures, not necessarily following what the church says about the scriptures. And my differentiation between the two, I'm a Christian first and a card-carrying member of the church second. And believe me, after that, my relationship with the church has never been the same. It was at least 4 years before I could basically even go back into a church after I left there, because I just felt overwhelmingly sad, after what members of the church down there had tried to do. And I was a bit confused to begin with. Was it God's will that be done? Was I in the wrong? Because these people were seemingly, or it felt like, they were persecuting me, basically. I eventually forgave the priest involved, although he said it was regrettable several times. He never apologised. In fact, he never really thought that he had done anything wrong, which I find to this day absolutely astounding. Having said that, he of course is now quite a high-flying individual within the church. He's a bishop, which is not where I left him, 10 years ago. So he's moved on and upwards in the world. The other thing that is an issue is that was something that I had wanted to continue with after I left there. I either wanted to continue in the church, which is impossible because the mess that occurred down there is like a blight. And wherever I apply to, the first thing they obviously do is then go back to St Paul's, and they get all this shit that I'm telling you about. And why would you want to employ somebody that had that in their background? The assumption, of course, is that the church was right and I was wrong, which to my mind is absolutely wrong. I was right and they were being absolute, idiots in what they were doing. But that follows you around, so at least until all those individuals have gone, have all passed on, and there's nobody there that knows me or remembers me at all, I feel like I'm barred from that, which is strange because I did feel like the only time I was called to do something, actually spiritually called to do something, was to go there in the first place. The second thing was, regardless of anything, I was going to stay in a big city and stay in London if possible. Now, the time I should have been looking for, the future and my new job or whatever, was during the summer of 2004, when I couldn't, because all I was doing was focused on trying to sort out this war that they were waging against me. And of course then I broke my fingers and, I didn't get the job at York, which, although I can't prove it, I'm pretty sure had something to do with, you know, people that were down there phoning ahead of interviews and stuff like that. I can't prove any of that, but that's the way I feel, and that's what I honestly wouldn't put past them. So I was left with broken fingers, and the job came to a natural conclusion, and I had no choice but to move back up here. So, you know, and I've been here ever since, and that was a decade ago. So my life really changed, completely changed, direction and everything, spiritually, emotionally, the way I saw the world, and one could say that I suppose I grew up. But that was for me a sort of the final loss of innocence, really. If you can't trust members of the church, you know, ordained ministers specifically put in charge of your welfare, who can you trust? And to round off, let's do the birthdays. So we have Lindsay Slapp, Jen Palasiewski, Michelle Fisher, Vaughan Lee, Matt McGlinchey, Alistair Watson, Donna Harrington, Mark Lambert, Josh Bentley, Sam Bentley and Scott Harris. So half the world have their birthdays this week. I also think that Denise from the forum has her birthday, because I'm pretty sure she has it the same day as Michelle. And with it being October and not whenever else she put her birthday down, for I think that this is correct information here that YouTube is, that Facebook is telling me. Anyway, so happy birthday to all of them. I hope they eat lots of cake. I'm not eating cake, I'm on a diet, but I'm also hungry for tea, so I'm going to eat chicken pie. Probably isn't much better, but there we are. It wouldn't do for one to be desperate, would it?